Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Shrewsbury International School, Bangkok. Thailand's most successful international school has two campuses, City Campus in Sukhumvit Rama 9 for children aged 3 to 11, and Riverside in Sathorn Rama 3 for children aged 3 to 18. Both campuses are now accepting applications for an August 2021 start, and their early years program and other selected year groups for immediate start. Visit shrewsbury.ac.th/podcast to find out more. On this episode, we take a look at Chinatown and Talad Noi, two of the most interesting hoods in the city.
So if you want to hear about some of the coolest, off-the-beaten-path neighborhoods in Bangkok, you'll get a lot from this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 on a vacation with a friend, but he left, I stayed, and you're all stuck with me.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 20 years ago, fell in love with checking to see if my street is underwater before I leave the house every morning, so I never left.
That's right.
Ain't that the truth?
That's right.
All right, first, a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos with guests, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about the weird ongoing saga of a guy who got thrown in jail for writing a bad hotel review online. Also, the incredible rainstorm tonight and how you need to work that into your plans when finding a new place to live in Bangkok. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Cool beans. All right, on this episode, we return to our popular Neighborhood Focus series for a look at one of our favorite places in Bangkok, the mighty and mysterious Yaowarat, otherwise known as Chinatown. Now, we're also going to be including the Talad Noi neighborhood here because that's a popular place to visit with a few cool places to live as well, and it's right next door to Chinatown, so we figured why not just do kind of a two-for-one thing. So for our purposes tonight, the area we're going to be talking about is very roughly kind of a weird-shaped rectangle tilted to the right. And on the bottom is the Chao Phraya River, and on the top is the subway line along Rama 4 and Charoen Krung roads. The right side of the rectangle is Padung Krung Kasem Canal at River City, and the left side is Yaowarat Road, basically the border between Chinatown and Pahurat, or Little India. I know that's a lot of deep diving into Bangkok geography there, but take a look at our show graphic and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I used to live in Talad Noi, so I have a very deep-seated fondness for this area. And Ed, you've spent a lot of time down in Chinatown too, and both of us are looking forward to getting out, which we did last night.
That's right. Yeah, I think this is one of Bangkok's coolest areas. It's an area that is diverse, unique. It does seem to be changing, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But it does, it's kind of off the beaten path for most tourists. But this is the kind of thing that if you were like a long stay tourist, or if you're just looking for something different, heading to either Chinatown or Talad Noi, I think would be a really good move.
Yeah, and both of us were kind of shocked too. And we were deciding what we're going to talk about. We're like, oh, we should do neighborhood focus. What neighborhood can we do one? And you said Chinatown. And I'm like, surely we've done Chinatown before, but I
Right.
searched the whole website and all of the archives, and no, we haven't. So I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, let's maybe we should talk about Chinatown first, because Talad Noi is actually a little bit more complicated. So essentially the term Chinatown, the main part of Chinatown is just along Yaowarat Road, and it's a ton of restaurants, other types of shops. Seems to be a lot of gold shops. Yeah. But tons of street restaurants and like a bunch of interesting side stories. And it really, at night especially, it just kind of explodes.
Yeah. You know, if Chinatown was the podcast, the side soys would be the bonus show. Like that's where all the really gnarly stuff happens, right? Like the side soys in Chinatown, and there's, you stop and you're like, where does this little street go? And it just kind of goes down and then curves off to the right into darkness. That's where the coolest stuff is. Not the best stuff, but the most interesting stuff. And I found that just walking down these random soys, no one will bother you, no one will stop you or anything like that. Just smile and be friendly, and you'll really get a good idea of to the sort of like the deep soul of Chinatown, away from the main road that most people stick to.
Now, Greg, you know something about the history of Chinatown in Bangkok. You were dropping some knowledge on me the other night.
That's right, knowledge bombs, baby. Yeah, well, I told you the story last night. When I moved there, I lived in Chinatown. Actually, I lived in Talad Noi for about 5 years, and when I moved there, I thought, like, all right, I'm going to become Mr. Chinatown. I'm going to know this place inside and out. That's my mission. That's my goal. And like the first weekend I was there by myself, put on my walking shoes, got my, all my supplies and bag, threw it over my shoulder, headed out. And within half an hour, I was completely lost. I had no idea where I was. And I just sort of like wandered around until I saw a landmark and then went back home. So the history of the city of Chinatown is really interesting. And actually the original location of the Chinese community in Bangkok back in the mid 1700s was at the present location in Ratanakosin of the Grand Palace in that area. But when the Grand Palace was decided that it was going to be built on that location, King Rama I was like, hey, Chinatown, how about you move down the river a few kilometers? And they all moved down to what was then sort of this swampy, forgotten marshland south, just sort of on the east side of the river there. And this was sort of centered around a really, really cool and important temple, which we'll talk to a little bit later, called Wat Patum Kong Ka. And so the Chinatown sort of grew up around this street called Sampang Lane, and this sort of very long, narrow soi with little shop houses lining both sides of it.
Which, of course, you can still walk along today, just to be clear.
Oh yeah, it's still there, and it's a great shopping place if you love crowds. But when the community got too big for Sampang Lane, that's when Yaowarat Road was built, and that remains the main sort of drag of Chinatown today. So there's a ton of history there, and a lot of these little sois that we were talking about go back right to the founding of Chinatown.
You know the details of Chinatown way better than I do, so I can just give my take. My take is that Chinatown is chaotic, with an incredible amount of street food. Like those are the two. When I think of Chinatown, I think of a busy, just crowded. Cause I'm always there at night. Want to go down with friends, whatever, to eat. So it's chaos, man.
Yeah, that's a good point too. We should also mention during the daytime, Chinatown is kind of dead. There's not a lot to do.
I mean, it still might be time to go there. Some restaurants are going to be open, but yeah, no, it's really, I would say like early evening, 7, 8 o'clock. It's just packed, and there's just energy, man. But it's chaotic. But there's just a crazy amount of street food there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. We should also mention too that we're recording this right in sort of as the pandemic is here, so the borders are still closed. There's not any tourists in Thailand, but we went down there last night and it was still real busy. Right, like 99% of them were local Thai people. Right. I
mean, so with no tourists, it's still pretty busy. I feel like maybe not as busy as before. It is a tourist destination, but it's Chinatown is. Wouldn't you agree? It's kind of a secondary tourist destination. It's not on the top of your list when you come to Bangkok.
I don't know, man. I love going to Chinatowns no matter what city I'm in the world. I think they're awesome. They've all got their own unique little patina about them.
Right. No, I think they're great. I would say add it to the list.
Totally.
Because it's worth checking out, especially if you have time to wander around the back sois and hit Sampang. Sampang is it's this narrow thing, and there's just tons of little shops. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. Speaking of food, you brought up food, and I got to say my favorite street stall in all of Bangkok is in Chinatown, and it's on Yaowarat Soi 11. There's a little street cart called Nai Lek Ouan, and he makes gui chap, the rolled rice noodles with pig entrails and spicy peppery soup. I get it without the pig entrails. I just get the crispy pork. Dude, is so good. So good. I love it.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't know that much on the main strip of Yaowarat. I just eat where my friends eat. But I do know this kind of bizarre small joint, which I think I believe I mentioned in the show we did a long time ago on like vegetarian restaurants in Bangkok. But there was a place called Chijuya, spelled Chijuya, and it's on Song Wat Road. You and I were just walking around there. So Song Wat is kind of roughly parallel to the main part of Yaowarat. Now Yaowarat bends, so it's a little bit tricky, but so Song Wat is like closer to the river than Yaowarat. And Chijuya is a vegetarian sushi place. So it's
weird.
So it's all fake fish, if you want that, but there's a lot of just vegetable sushi and sashimi. And I know for some people that sounds like a contradiction, but I'm telling you, it's pretty good. So Chijuya, Chij, check it out. It's a very small place. It's not a nice place. It looks like a half abandoned cafeteria. So it's not a nice restaurant.
You're a hell of a salesman.
No, but the food is good. The food is
nice.
good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. The weird thing about Chinatown too is that like a lot of people who really want to, if you move to Bangkok, move to a big city like this, and you really want a unique or interesting like local experience, a lot of people might be like, I'm just going to move there. But I don't think, to my knowledge anyway, I don't think there's a hell of a lot of places in Chinatown where you can move. Like not a lot of places to rent unless you sort of get out away from the main drag a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. You're right. I personally have never heard of a foreigner or expat who lives in Chinatown. Now you were close. I mean, you were in Talad Noi, so you were not far, but right. You were not in Chinatown. No. So I'm sure it's possible. Again, that's interesting. An expat, I guess I'm thinking of a there must be some Chinese expats. Maybe they're more likely to live in Chinatown.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just thinking of like some guy from
right.
Venice or
right.
Cleveland or Canada who wants to move to Chinatown. Like unless you wander around Soi to Soi and start looking for signs or something like that, you probably can't find it. I can't think of any condos or anything.
Yeah, I'm with you. Doesn't seem to be a great place to live, but an excellent place to visit.
Yeah, I think it's just because the land there is it's been in the family for centuries.
Well, there's a lot of old buildings there. I mean, it is old Bangkok for sure.
Totally, yeah, original Bangkok. Actually, but there are some really good hotels in Chinatown. One of the bigger ones is called the Grand China Hotel, and that's up sort of towards like the northwest corner of Chinatown. Cool. And actually, our buddy Hoon was staying there a couple of years ago when he was through town. He brought me some shoes.
Oh, right.
I can't get shoes here.
You mean some pontoons?
He brought me some canoes, and so I went to meet him at the Grand China Hotel. And then there's another really great place, which is very well known, sort of closer to the heart of Chinatown, called the Shanghai Mansion.
Oh, okay.
That's this beautiful, like sort of old 1920s style Chinese decorated hotel, which is really great. But
yeah, I mean, I think that if you were a tourist who wanted to do something different, or an expat who is getting tired of Sukhumvit, I would say heading down to Chinatown like in the middle of an afternoon and walking around while the sun is up, and then hanging around until the sun goes down, and then eating, that would be a great day, I think.
Oh yeah,
awesome. Or half day. You could head to Chinatown at like 3 p.m. and catch the daytime stuffs and walk around, and then hit all the stuff at night. I think it's worth it.
Oh yeah, totally. That would be a great day. There's also a ferry right at the very far end of Song Wat Road. There's a ferry that goes right across the river to Long 1919, which is that great old warehouse district on the other side, on the Tonbury side of the river, the cool side of the river. So that's easy to get there too. But so Chinatown, I mean, I don't really think it's a place for expats to consider living unless you probably speak Chinese or know someone who has a place to rent there. But it's a hell of a place to visit. Tons of food, very much worthwhile walking around. And like you and I noticed last night, they've cleaned it up a lot. And Evo and I talked about this actually back in season 2. They've put in like barriers for pedestrians to walk along the side of the road. A lot of the street carts have like neon signs.
It does seem to be more organized. So when I think of Chinatown, I think of chaos. But you're right. It seems to be more under control than before.
Yeah, barely organized chaos. So
Right.
very, very much worth a visit. But the biggest surprise for me of the night where we went out last night was my old hood, Talad Noi. And you know the history of this place?
Well, I don't know it as well as you do. I'll just say that we've talked about Talad Noi before on the photography episode, and then you've occasionally told stories about your neighborhood, your old neighborhood. But damn, I just love it. I love Talad Noi. I just love it. And I've been going for a long time because I went to your old apartment, 10 years ago. But just wandering around those sois, it's so cool and weird and fascinating. And I think the cat is out of the bag. When we were walking around yesterday, there was actually a photography tour that we saw of some people. And so everyone kind of, now I would say it's like a lot of people know about it, but damn, it's just, that's for any kind of tourist, I would tell them just walk around there for an afternoon.
All right, another thank you to our sponsor, Shrewsbury International School, Bangkok. If you're looking for a leading international school education for your child in Sathorn or Sukhumvit, they have 2 campuses accepting applications now. Visit their website at shrewsbury.ac.th/podcast to find out more. Yeah, I can say this with all honesty. Every single time I've gone down there over the past 4 or 5 years, it's been cooler than the last time I was down.
Yeah, it's like, how do we describe it? Like, first off, it is working class, and we've talked about it before that depending on the little mini soi you're on, it's just the kind of area that there's just random tires and engines and old machines and whatever, it's just, and as you and I point out many times, depending on the time of day, it can look like a scene on a Blade Runner or some other dystopian thriller.
Yeah. Or it can look like a scene out of Chernobyl with all these random piles of abandoned machinery.
Yeah. So just be clear to our listeners, this is not a nice, clean, super clean area. That's not what it is. It's just this incredible old. So it has a working class vibe. It has a rustic old vibe, as in a lot of the buildings seem to be very old. So it's not just a modern cleanup. It's not gentrified in the normal sense of the word gentrified. It's all old buildings. What else? And it's also clearly influenced by Chinatown. So it's got like a Chinese vibe to it.
Right, totally. I gotta say, I'm a little bit pissed too, because when I was there, I lived there, like you said, about 10 years ago. And it was a cool neighborhood, but it wasn't nearly as cool as it is now. I'm kind of pissed that I left about 10 years too early, because there's always a new cool hip cafe or guest house or restaurant. Things these days might be a little bit touch and go. I'm sure a lot of them are closed. But we actually found a couple of places last night that have apparently been there for about a year and a half. We had no idea. And
this was incredible. So picture Greg and I walking in this neighborhood that he and I know pretty well, and he used to live in. And I've gone down there just to take pictures multiple times at night because it's so cool. So this is a neighborhood that we know. But we're talking about, wow, we really love this place. We're walking down, one of the mini sois, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the perfect area for some kind of cool club, like right along the river. And we turn a corner, and I was actually going to keep walking, but Greg noticed that the light there were like green lights, and he's like, oh, what's this? That's kind of funky. And so we just kind of turned around and kind of wandered in, and it turns out it was a really cool club right on the river, like from an old factory probably that's 200 or 300 years old.
Yeah, it's this place called Ban Rim Nam in Talad Noi, and it turns out it's actually owned by a guy that I used to kind of know, named Florian. And check this out, Ed. We can announce this here. We can announce it to our listeners. And this will happen soon.
Alrighty.
But this place will be, I've confirmed it with Florian, the site of our next podcast meetup.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah.
That's going to be really fun, because this place was just a beautiful, shockingly gorgeous thing.
Yeah,
right on the river.
But beautiful in a super retro rustic thing. It was just, yeah. So if you check Facebook, you can see some pictures of this place. But it's just cool. It's kind of artsy. Those of you who listened to our show last week about the river neighborhoods, that there's an area known as the Creative District, and this restaurant kind of fits the bill. They're just kind of cool works of art all over the place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, so we're looking forward to getting back there. But it just exemplifies what it's like now in Talad Noi. Like every time you go down there, there's a new thing or a new a new place. And it's really great too, because people are starting to realize the value of this stuff that's just been sitting there abandoned for 100 years. This is what David Robinson was talking about on the previous episode about the Creative District. You know? Yeah,
you and I were chatting a bit about what development means, and when I say that I'm for development of the river, that doesn't mean I think it should all be condos and malls. That would be a nightmare. These old, but the problem is you have all these old buildings, some of them essentially unused. So you have like what you and I think is prime real estate on the river, and there's just some old factory that's been sitting there for no one's used for 50 years.
Right. But like you said last night, like just because a place is not knocked down and built into a mall, it doesn't mean it's not developed.
That's right.
This is a very developed place. It just happens to be the original structure.
Yeah. I'm just, I just think the city and obviously David Robinson's organization needs to be proactive, because it's just a part of Bangkok that drives me crazy, that I feel like there's this asset that is largely left untouched. It's getting better. We've had other shows on it, but this kind of thing, like a cool little club down at Back Soi, right on the river, it's something that makes Bangkok special.
Yeah, totally. Now, Talad Noi has a similar issue with living there than Chinatown does, where that a lot of the houses down there are old family houses. Like there's a place right by this Ban Rit Nam called Sohang Thai, which is that place we've talked about before. This old Chinese place, like with a 4-meter deep scuba diving training pool in the middle of it. Really great fruit shakes there. So a lot of these houses have been in the families for generations, so there's not a lot of places to live. But that being said, the building that I used to live in, it was called Thai Satit Condo, kind of a rundown, grungy building, but really cool location and a great view of the river. And a little bit further up the Soi, there's the Sea Praia Riverview Condo, which is also a very fine place to live. But besides that, there's a couple of little smaller places. There's the Riverview Guest House, which I'm not sure if they rent monthly or not, but that's more of a hotel kind of place. There's only a handful of places to stay. Again, much like Chinatown, it's just old family houses that are not good for walking around and finding a place to rent.
But I do think there's a bunch of hostels, like in Talad Noi or technically in Chinatown. Yeah. So I mean, if you're just looking for a cheap place to stay short term, they definitely have that.
Totally. But I'm thinking like if you want to move down there.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of choice, but there are places.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say, Talad Noi is not really a place to go if you want to like party hard. I mean, there's places where you can get a drink, cool places that we've talked about. But I don't know, man, it just might be my just favorite part of the whole city. It's like if you just, it's just so different and weird, and it's Thai, but it's not. And it's just different from other parts of the city.
Yeah. Well, that's why we talked about the whole river, right? The river itself is different from parts of the city. And then parts of the river are different from other parts of the river and parts of the city.
Yeah. I mean,
we also stopped at a place called Samsara, which is one of my old favorite places, a little tiny cafe that's like literally right on the river, right over the river. Right. Which is a fantastic place to chill out with a drink.
It's very cool, but Samsara does mean suffering. So it is a little bit of an odd name.
Depends how much you drink, It can be expensive when you get that bill.
It's one of those cross-cultural things where, a word just sounds cool. Like samsara, It just sounds cool. But it means the unending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, Greg.
Well, I mean, we are all trapped in this weird year. Maybe this is it coming to fruition.
Right. But Samsara is a cool little joint, man. We had a great drink there. And it's right on the river.
Yeah. And right next to that is a really interesting temple called Wat Patum Kong Ka. It's got a very interesting slice of history there. It's got a giant stone slab that's kind of off to the corner in its own little like sala, and it's got a couple of prayer flags wrapped around it. It's dark and ignored. But years ago, there's a really, really great book called Sampang Inside and Out by Edward Van Roy. And it's very nerdy and dry, but it's a really interesting history of Chinatown. And I actually contacted Edward Van Roy, and he gave me a walking tour of Chinatown. This was 12 years ago now.
Oh, and wow.
He took me by this temple, and he said, "You see that stone there?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "That's the stone where they used to execute people for like high crimes and treason against the state." So
Wild.
this temple, Wat Patum Kong Ka, has this execution stone there that's sort of completely ignored. There's no English plaque or anything like that.
You know what a pleasant thing to you like show up with your kids to to go to the temple, and you're like, oh yeah, there's the rock where they used to cut people's heads off.
Might work. Hey, if you don't go to bed tonight, just have to bring you down here to the rock, the head rock. But that's very indicative of Chinatown as a larger destination, is that there's all these weird little things and little like throwbacks and corners and tidbits.
It is one of the oldest parts of Bangkok.
Yeah. So Talad Noi, man, it's a must see if you haven't been there. You can easily spend an afternoon there. But like I said, it just gets cooler every time.
The fact that we just stumbled into that restaurant, and I've been down there taking pictures, and I missed that restaurant for the last year. I never saw it before, but we talked about it in our photography episode. But if you're the kind of person who just likes to take pictures, then Talad Noi and Chinatown is so colorful and so energetic. Talad Noi is just so unique that great place to take pictures.
Yeah. And as for getting in and out, it's never been really easy to get in and out of Chinatown, but it's easier now. Like the boat, there's there on the west end of Chinatown, there's the Ratchawong Pier, and on the east side, there's the Marine Department Pier, and you can get sort of into Talad Noi or Chinatown from there. But now there's the subway. The closest subway used to be Hualampong, but now the closest subway stop is Wat Mang Kon, which is the new subway station, which I still haven't been to. But that's just a couple steps away from Yaowarat Road itself, so it's super easy to get in there now.
Yeah, you could walk from there. Yeah.
Totally. Getting in and out with a taxi, it can sometimes be a bit of a nightmare depending on the day, or if it starts pissing down with rain like it did for you and I last night when we were lucky.
Right.
Oh, and we should also mention too, there's the Cavalry Church, which is Thailand's second Christian church, which is a very historic place. There's also Wat Tri Mit with the Golden Buddha, which is also very well worth your time to visit. Also an awesome place to check out. Watch out for touts outside though saying it's closed. Although who knows, this time it might be true.
All in all, it's just a great place to walk around, just to see what you want to see or to take pictures or whatever.
Yeah. Great place to visit. Also a great place to live, but not a lot of selection.
Not a lot of options, right? Yeah.
I will say though, as someone who did live there, I've told you this story before, Ed, and maybe I've said it on the show too, but whenever a friend would come to visit, I would say, get out of the subway and get on the motorcycle guys and tell them the name of my building. They'll take you right here. Not the tuk-tuk guys, because they always rotate. And those guys don't know the neighborhood as well. And so inevitably, my friends would come by and be like, oh yeah, I'll just get in a tuk-tuk. It's easier. And then they'd get lost and they'd call me and they'd say, yeah, I'm on a one-way road and there's a 7-Eleven and a temple. I'm like, dude, that could be 1,000 kilometers of streets in Chinatown. I have no idea where you are. So it is a bit of a nightmare to figure out. But once you do, it's like a merit badge.
For sure.
Your Chinatown, Bangkok merit badge.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
And now our listeners, they have their Chinatown merit badge too.
Yes, they do.
All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of life in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. This week, Ed, the truth, it's all you.
All right, Mr. Greg, we've talked before about the weird rubber band knot thing.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Talked about that before. So that's not really what I'm referring to. Instead, I want to refer to, in general, when you get a bunch of condiments with something you order and they're in small plastic bags.
Okay.
So, and it's like, I feel like there's just some standard things that you almost always got. I feel like you always get like a little bag with a rubber band around it of chili. Yeah,
then, like vinegar or whatever.
Yeah, well, then there's another one, and another one will be like white powder, which is like sugar. You almost always get like some sugar, right?
I've been snorting that. That's only sugar.
Another common thing is like soy sauce. Yeah. But it's just, now, of course, those damn rubber bands can be annoying. But how do you feel about the selection of condiments? What do you think? Do you when you get those, do you think like you wish you had something else? Do you ever use the sugar?
No. Never put sugar in Thai food. I don't know why people do that.
Right.
I like the vinegar, little bags of vinegar.
Well, yeah, isn't that kind of like but it's somewhat spicy, right? Isn't it like kind of like a chili vinegar?
Yeah, I don't mind that, but in general, no, I never use the little bags of condiments that come. I've got my own stuff. I got my own hot sauce, my Tabasco. Got my special sriracha sauce, and now they came out with Tabasco sriracha sauce.
Is that for real? I've never seen that.
Yeah, I have it in my kitchen.
Oh my god, I got to try that. I'm a Tabasco Chipotle guy, but
okay, but yeah, the little bags. No, I never got into it. Like maybe some vinegar and some joke or something like that, but I just generally ignore them.
If you combine it with the rubber band thing, if you do that, then it's a loathe for sure. Because seriously, you get your food and then you get like 4 tiny bags with individually sealed rubber bands tied in the unique tie knot.
Right.
So if you want to use them, you have to you have to decode the lock to get the rubber band off.
And you see it too on some street cards. They get there in the morning and they're like, all right, who's on bag duty today? And there's one guy's job to make like 150 little bags of chili sauce.
Right. Yeah.
Each with its own little rubber band. It's incredibly wasteful. And they never like ask you, oh, would you like this? They just put it in the bag. And more often than not, they go into the garbage. So I would say a live with from me. But yeah, when you combine it with the annoying ass rubber bands, it's a loathe.
Agree. That's exactly how I look at it. Because normally I don't use them. So they're just kind of something I live with, even though it's annoying. But if I ever want to use them and I got to wrestle with the rubber bands, nightmare. That is a nightmare. All right. So as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd normally say thanks to this week's new patron, but our man this week wants to stay anonymous, which is totally cool. He happens to be the second patron this month to request a non-shout out. So
yeah. Actually, it's funny to get, we sent an email out to our patrons like, hey, thanks for the support. And please tell us a little bit about yourself. But this guy is our second patron to say no need. I'm just happy to support you guys, but we can't let a good deed go unpunished. So I'm just going to say this dude's initials, IU. That's his initials.
All right.
IU, if you're out there, thank you very much, sir. We do appreciate it, and we hope you're enjoying your anonymity.
Thanks, IU. All right, a final thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. Or Bangkok Podcast on social media, BangkokPodcast.com on the web, or simply BangkokPodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, you can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can chat with us online, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg. So thank you for listening, everyone. Stay dry, stay well, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure. There might be the background noise of the fan.
Your wavy hair is... Your long, dreamy locks are waving in the fan.
It's all part of my image. I really care what you think of me, Greg.
Your liberal arts professor image?
Right.
Where's your sweater?
My goal is to be like a Bose headphones commercial, like just walking down the street. A Bose speakers commercial. Remember those where the guy's hair was blowing back, right?
Maybe the Maxell ones where the guy's sitting in the chair.
Oh, that's Maxell, not Bose, right? What is Bose? There was a Bose commercial that but there was the Maxell. Bose had something similar, didn't they?
Can't remember. I just know I used to work in a Maxell distributor, so that image was everywhere.
Oh, funny.
Did you see that Jackass episode where they tried to recreate it? And they put the guy sitting in the chair, but he was sitting behind a jet airplane. They turned on the jets. and then they just the guy in the chair thought it was just going to be like a photo thing, but then his friends, of course, because they're idiots, started throwing all kinds of stuff into the jet wash of the airplane, like footballs and stuff, and this guy was just getting slammed. Getting hit by a football going 90 miles an hour.
That's great.
Good stuff.